let this go for about a minute while everyone trickles in. I see some attendees are coming in. Thank you for joining us today. This is our first event for Profitability Engine Radio. Now, what is Profitability Engine Radio? We will talk about that in a second, but I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Lauren Hawthorne. I'm a fractional CMO at House of Revenue, and we are in our lovely podcast room today. Now, normally we'd be doing this via Zoom at our respective home offices, but my speaker today is in the office with us today. Drew, can I have you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. My name is Drew Lyon. I'm the founder and CEO of Focused Energy. Focused Energy does fractional finance, accounting, and operations for scaling SMBs. All the fun stuff of where are you going, how are you going to get there, and the fun in between that.
Awesome, thank you. So, Focus Energy is launching a Profitability Engine Radio. We're going to be doing webinars, we're going to be doing podcasts, live interviews, and why do we call it that? So you may have heard of the revenue engine, which is marketing, sales, customer service. Well, the profitability engine, when that is all aligned, that is finance, accounting, and operations, which Focus Energy specializes in. When that is all aligned, that is when you can really drive profitability, and that is what our events are going to be kind of centered around. So let's get started. So our first topic, navigating a downturn as a business owner. Like, how do we stay calm when we are in a period of inflation? We thought we dug ourselves out of this COVID recession. But yeah, as a business leader, as a business owner, what are some ways that we can stay calm and stay profitable? So my first question, as a fractional CFO for hundreds of different companies, what are some common financial decisions that you see many different businesses and owners make when a downturn is looming?
It's either one of two things. There's a freak out, which is bad, or there's no decisions, which is also a decision, which is bad. The reality is, when it comes to a downturn and really looking at what decisions do you have available, you really have to understand your position in the market, how your business is performing, and making sure that your decisions are aligned with your strategies. Some of the common things that you can do to really affect positive outcomes, and some of the things I've seen people do, are they'll cut spend, but they don't know why they're cutting or how much is appropriate to cut because they don't have a plan to align to. Other things are slowing down or stopping hiring. Like, that's fine, but there's repercussions to everything that happens. So when we look at, okay, great, you cut hiring, but you didn't hire all the CS staff, the customer support staff that you needed. Well, what happens if accidentally things actually go kind of well, and now you're understaffed and you can't get caught up? Like, understanding why you're cutting and how you're going to measure that and what the impact of that is like paramount to being successful in managing spend in a downturn. Reducing R&D expenses or other long-term, like long shot projects, like that's always a good one, just to be able to be more conservative until you can kind of see what's happening. Really also looking at, there's many ways to either you can slow down payments to vendors, so you can kind of extend that a little bit to keep cash in the bank, or you can change your customer payment terms. You can really look at getting retainers, or you can incentivize upfront payments with discounts, or you can look at accepting credit cards and ACH as opposed to checks. Really, it's understanding what levers do you have to pull and why are you making the cuts. The only really bad thing I've seen is just not taking any action. Like, standing still isn't really an option.
And now we're here at the beginning of the year. I guess it's March 1st now, but this is now a really good time to kind of reevaluate your plan. If it's the same plan as it was 2 years ago, and now that we kind of have this downturn looming, you can kind of check that out, talk to your customers, and kind of see, like, do I need to reevaluate my plan? Do I need to make changes? Yeah. And as a marketer, I see the cost cutting, usually marketing can be one of the first departments that's cut. And it's like, no, we need to be really reevaluating and really like talking to our customers and saying, what else can we do in marketing? How can we pivot and not just pull back and lose all the momentum that we had from the year before?
Yeah, I think that's when people start to make fear-based, ego-based decisions, like they know everything, or they're so terrified of making the wrong decision. Downturns are actually really interesting, and what's interesting is the stuff you read on the news today. There's an indicator that's come out that's basically said it's been right 100% of the time for the past 60 years, where where we see the 10-year moving average or 10-month moving average shift, and all of a sudden it signals a bull market. I'll tell you right now, there's no bull market in Main Street going on. And the reality is, when you look at greater economic trends and you're seeing, oh, hey, like maybe we should be spending now. And because it's going to be a bullish indicator and the stock market's doing well. Well, that's great. But like, I think more and more small businesses are more and more detached from the larger, stock market. And, nothing revelatory there, but ultimately, when you're seeing that your market is down, even if everything else is up, like that's kind of the interesting thing with globalization, is it's changing perspective of you could be crushing it in your market because it's up, but everyone else is struggling. So you really understand your market, but also cutting marketing in sales during a downturn could be one of the worst things you've ever done, because there's huge opportunities because everybody's cutting. The reality is you should be looking at ways to engage with your customers and actually increasing sales and marketing spend. Go capture market share. Like, there's rare opportunities for that type of accretive growth, and not following the herd is generally a really good decision.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this a marketing decision, but I can actually, with marketing tools, track whether
your competitors, for example, are not spending money on Google Ads anymore. Their SEO is going down. I can see that they're not posting anymore on social media, things like that. That's when you need to jump in. Great. Well, my next question is, speaking of reducing costs, without completely getting rid of your marketing, sales, and customer service department, how can business owners reassess their expenses and streamline operations to maintain profitability without losing sight of their business goals that they had set out to accomplish?
And this is where complexity is a general problem. And everyone, when you introduce too much complexity, it occludes the ability to understand really what's happening and what you're trying to do. So when we're looking at optimizing spend, I'm a big fan of keep it simple. Boil it down to your key activities. And really the easiest way to do that is you can follow the customer journey and be talking to your customer. Go ask what they like about your product. What don't they like? What else could you be selling them that they would buy from you? This is really going to inform you of where you should be spending. If you're seeing that, hey, they really don't like this thing that you keep pouring money into, and you've talked to them and you've decided it's going to be pretty hard to get it there, you've probably stopped spending on that then and shift a little bit. That's a great way to be optimizing spend, because you're drilling for oil and you're just not going to hit it.
Right.
And there may be a really simple thing that your customers are asking for that you didn't realize that you could offer them that's pretty easy to do, and all of a sudden they'll pay you for it. And all of a sudden you have an entirely new revenue stream from either your existing base or, ideally the customers you want to be working with.
Yeah, I think that's such a basic thing that a lot of companies just don't do. And what worked 2 years ago
when you started the company may not be working now. And at House of Revenue, we always say, just set up 20-minute calls with 6 different customers of your ideal customer profile, and just see what they have to say. What are their struggles coming up in the recession, among the uncertainty, and how can you fit in with that? Yeah. I think it's also,
really looking at, you want to be hearing the things you don't want to hear. You want the tough feedback. You want the ooh, wow, no, we're really not doing as good a job as we thought. That's where the opportunity lies. And then you can really start to optimize what you're doing so you can get greater returns. I mean, some other areas that you can look to optimize spend is overhead, especially in, the Zoom world and the virtual meetings that we have today. Is a facility really necessary? Are you spending on the right things? Are they revenue generating activities? If they're not, be very, very diligent in scrutinizing that spend, looking at personnel. Are you level setting salaries appropriately? Are you hiring ahead of something without actually having a plan to know that you really do need these roles? Are you over capacity and you're not utilizing your staff effectively? These aren't easy decisions. Don't get me wrong, firing a staff member is difficult and reducing workforce is difficult, but we really like to think of the households in their entirety. And sometimes it's a save the arm or save the patient decision. And that takes real integrity and fortitude to make those tough calls effectively on time, and not delaying and bringing that truth forward and having a tough conversation early on.
Yes, absolutely. And I think getting rid of our office in a very lovely podcast
room, we're saying it would be very sad, but sometimes those tough decisions just need to be made. And especially when we're coming towards downturn, making cuts in the right areas, not just oh my gosh, what's the most expensive thing we're spending on right now? Let's just get rid of it. Tech stack is another good one that we like to evaluate and has revenue. Are you spending, $1,000 a month on a software you don't need? Those kinds of things add up. Do you recommend during a downturn that business owners diversify the revenue streams now as opposed to before? I mean, do we look at those things now?
I think looking at I kind of have a truth and honesty perspective on this. Diversification is sometimes great, but those opportunities can be very expensive. And if I've said it once, I'll probably say it a bajillion more times. Talk to the customer. Go understand what is that customer's truth, because that's your truth. Understanding what you're doing well today and what you're not doing well, while those truths may be hard to hear, you maybe don't need to diversify.
Mhm.
Maybe you just need to focus down in your core and say, hey, let's stop losing customers. Let's retain what we have. And based on that feedback and being honest with ourselves
Mhm.
and really saying hey, great, here's how we can really optimize what we're spending on and also diversify in the right areas. And this is where ego comes into play, where someone's like, I really think I'm the preeminent thinker in this industry. And I know the customers need this. No, you're not.
Well, and what I've seen too is maybe you were 10 years ago, but everything is changed
Yeah.
now. That's usually what it is. Yes, you were number one a while ago.
You started this business, but now you got to pivot.
You gotta listen to the market.
Yeah.
It's the data speaks volumes, and actual information from that data is really tells you what to do. Do you have super high churn? Okay, well, your product's probably kind of shitty then, and it doesn't meet your customers' needs. So that's your problem. Not adding more shiny objects to this turd. It's let's fix that first and clean that up, because that's how we keep more money in the bank. And I think it's really, when it comes down to it, it's get the plan together. How are you going to potentially diversify revenue? What is the end state? I always say it's what do you define good? Tell me what good looks like. And then we can build the plans to get there. And then we can understand what resources it's going to take. What other things are we working on right now that are going to make it difficult to maybe achieve that goal? And then you can really start to take action. And then with that plan, you have metric KPIs. How fast can you do this?
Mhm.
And then it comes back to the truth and honesty, metrics, KPIs, data, information, that's the truth. And if you see that, hey, 3 months running, this isn't on track, you gotta be honest with yourself and your company. And the leaders need to trust each other, say this isn't working. And sometimes that's, everybody in the room except the CEO. And that's so important about uncertain, difficult downturn times, is having trust in your company, in your leadership team, because sometimes everybody but the person in charge is seeing the truth. And if they can't trust that they can stand up and say, yeah, your idea you're so stoked about is kind of broken.
Yeah.
The business will fail. So that's, I think, the really important part about looking at diversification.
And something I like to talk about a lot too is the data nowadays. When I got my marketing degree 10 years ago, you couldn't track a whole lot. You could put up a billboard and say, let's see what happens. But now every part of your business is trackable. And if you're spending $1,000 a month on something, what is the return from that? If you're traveling to every conference you can to get leads, is that getting you anywhere? And is that worth spending money on? So yeah, I think the data conversation is so important within that as well, to make sure okay, start now, 3 months from now, is this working for me or is it not? Is this working for my customers? Is it not? Well, awesome. So my next question, how do you maintain stability within your teams, employees, customers, partners? How do you communicate with them that during this difficult time, hey, we're solid?
I mean, I think it's the way anybody would want to be. Put yourself in their shoes.
Mhm.
Would you want to just be be like a mushroom and fed shit and kept in the dark? Or would you want to have clarity from, somebody above you that's leading you down a path? Good, open, transparent communication is always core of leading a good business and building trust, whether that's with your customers, your suppliers, or your employees, really helping them to see hey, this is the plan. Here's how it's going. Here's what we're doing well. Here's what we're not doing well. And the reason that's important is because if you have trust and you're communicating effectively, especially with employees, and you say, hey, here's what we're not doing well, we need to really buckle down, that truth and honesty will build accountability within the team. And the person to the left will look to their left and to their right and say, hey, we need to be we need to like do better. Like we can do better. Or they might even have a great idea to look at building new revenue streams and diversifying or finding ways to cut and be more efficient. Like really having open, proactive dialogue with your customers, with your suppliers and employees, really looking at that to say like the most important measures of success for a business are really looking and saying, okay, great, revenue, profitability, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. You can be saying all the right things, but if it's not landing, if people aren't listening, you need to know that. So engaging with them.
Yes.
Surveys, discussions, really, and then you want the truth. Generally, you're looking for the thing you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you do it.
I think the more honesty, like as an employee, if I see my company's pipeline drying up, I start to freak out. And even if it's bad news, over communication with me is like, oh my gosh, it actually calms me down, even though they're like, oh no, our pipeline's drying up, but here's what we're doing about it. And here's the plan. It just, it does so many wonders for your clients, your employees. Exactly.
Well, it's also like banding a company together. If all of a sudden things are great and it's rainbows and unicorns and like, well, the reality is like, it's a shit show and nobody's saying anything. And then the next day, or let's say it goes on for months and it's getting worse and worse and worse. But meanwhile, everyone thinks it's good. And then one day it shifts so hard, that's really jarring.
Yeah.
And so by like trusting that your customers and your employees and your vendors really will be there with you to support you, it's not as dire as you think, but by communicating openly and honestly, you're going to be able to really kind of set expectations so that it's not one day like, oh shit.
Yes, absolutely. And it's less of a shock. Like, okay, I knew this was kind of coming. I knew that there was some, adjustments being made, and it's not like, oh my God, everything's changing, I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
I've experienced that at companies before. Like,
it's jarring.
We're restructuring everything. It's like, why? I thought everything was fine. Right. I was going along with my job and my day and everything. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, shit's hitting the fan. Yeah. I wanted to mention too to the audience, our chat box is open, our Q&A is open. If you'd like to shoot some questions at Drew, that is available. I have a couple more questions. Do you have any either positive, negative success stories, lessons from businesses that navigated the downturn and what we've learned from that?
Yeah, and the reason I kind of brought up previously talking about how your industry can be in a downturn, but like everyone else is doing well, is because in this increasingly globalized environment, one country's economy may be doing great while others are faltering. And so having that perspective also changes like the broader term of a downturn. And I look at it and I really have found that number one, like the successes I've seen, it was like a clean tech company, had been going to market and everyone loved the market, but wasn't really bought in. And like, there was a lot of like hype around it, but it hadn't yet caught. And this one company was way ahead of the curve, probably by 10 years. Now they're a quote unquote overnight success and have, $1 billion valuation.
Oh my gosh.
But during the time, what this business owner had done, which was so successful, was really communicated the vision appropriately and effectively and got everyone bought in, and people were really accountable for producing results and as much as could be produced. And by focusing on that accountability, they were able to, they had raised capital, but they cut back on spend dramatically. And were really, I wouldn't say miserly, but like they were really frugal. And it enabled them to weather the next like 3 or 4 years until they really get enough traction. And it was during that time that they made consistent, honest assessments of what was working and what wasn't working and had to let a partner go, which was really difficult. But like the reality was that person was actually holding the business back. And by being really diligent, creating accountability and setting plans and then measuring how they were doing, it became very apparent of where things weren't working. And that really got them through that really dry time. Another one was a SaaS company, raised a bunch of money. I think we raised about 2.5 million, and it wasn't big. It was about 2 million ARR. And what had gotten them there was not going to get them where they wanted to go. And it was during that shift that it was really the leadership team that had to mature and grow. And part of that was those open, honest dialogues about hearing like, we're just not doing what we need to do. And, what we thought was a good marketing strategy was not. And so what they did is they cut back way on marketing for a short period of time, reassessed, talked to the customer, got the feedback, understood what they really were messaging to, the pain points, and then in particular their ICP, getting that defined, their ideal client profile. And that really helped them to then really re-engage with the capital they did have left and make progress. And recently they raised another large round, which is awesome.
Wow, interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting hearing those businesses that thrived during the downturn. Those are some of my favorite stories recently. We do have a question from the audience. Thanks so much. What is your opinion on a light company acquisition during a downturn? For example, finding a light company who wants to get out and acquire them.
Yeah, no, I think ultimately it's from a potential on are we asking this from the acquirer or from a seller? Acquisition, I would say it's always comes down to, is it 1 + 1 is 3?
Mhm.
Is it 1 + 1 is 2 for now and 4 later? I've always looked at it and said, you really have to have a keen understanding of how you do what you do today. And then when you look at the acquisition target, if they're doing the same thing, but they do it way differently, they have a different culture and all of that, you have to be very pragmatic about understanding how are you going to integrate cultures and staff? How are you going to retrain staff on processes? What are you really acquiring? Are you acquiring a customer list? Are you acquiring an existing revenue base on a SaaS product? Are you acquiring, a bunch of services that while they have the same name, they're done completely differently? Are you acquiring just because it's the same type of services? Is it the same customer base? Maybe it's different sizes, different industries. Being really diligent in that process of assessing what is the company that's being acquired and how is that going to merge together? Something like 80% of M&A files.
Really?
Part of it's ego, but a lot of that is everyone does this post-deal diligence or pre-deal diligence. The deal occurs, everyone slaps hands, is stoked. And then after it, the thing goes in a desk drawer and it's never looked at. And you're like, the answers are all there. And it's using that at the real time, being honest with yourself of is this really a good deal?
Mm-hmm.
And some people just get deal fever and they want to close and purchase and acquire and grow. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense, but it's always, you want to look at how bringing a new company together from what you have today, how's that going to affect your culture?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a strong enough culture? Do you have strong enough leadership? What is the combination going to do for you?
Especially at a time when stress is heightened. Everyone's senses are elevated at the moment. So we have another comment here. In my opinion, culture is key with an acquisition. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. And sometimes you would just look at it from the financial perspective or from, oh, I'm acquiring 10 salespeople. This is amazing. But culture is very important in that.
I guess another final point on that was I had somebody recently come to me and they're like, hey, we got 2 million. We want to go buy somebody. And I knew the person I was talking to, just enough to be like, okay, well, why?
Yeah.
Well, we want to grow.
Okay.
Okay, well, and I was like, well, do you have really robust processes of how you do what you do? And is it plug and play? Do you have really good customer sat? And he's like, well, yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's a little hectic sometimes. And I was like, okay, well, who's the person you're thinking about acquiring? And he goes through it and he's like, well, their customers are kind of pissed a little bit. He doesn't really know, he doesn't have anything really written down. I was like, sounds like you're just buying a turd and it's going to be a shit show and you're going to spend 2 million and then another 2 million trying to fix it. And I was like, you're probably better off actually spending 2 million on your own business, getting a coherent plan,
right,
spending on sales and marketing and customer acquisition
versus jumping into something else
and trying to just it's a very expensive proposition. And same with whether we talk about a company acquisition or a new product feature set or a new market acquisition, these are all things that come into really breaking it down honestly and being having a high degree of scrutiny of, does the business have the ability to do it? Is the team capable? And if you are, then yeah, run with it. Do it as fast as possible.
But don't just do it because you have the cash and you want to do it.
Because it's the worst thing about business can be that chaos. And it's, I think it's keeping things steady. And that's what, the small, simple businesses, you would be shocked at some of the businesses that just pump out cash that are so boring. And it's like, you don't have to be massive to make a ton of money.
Right, right, absolutely. I think I like to keep these at 30 minutes. We're all have busy lives, so let's do one more question from the audience. What resources or support systems do business owners have to help navigate a downturn?
I think there's a lot. I think you can look to your to advisors, to fellow business owners, to speaking to like an often misunderstood is, your banker. Really going to talk to your banker and saying like, hey, I'm having these problems. Like, do you know of anyone that could help me? The other reality is mental health. During stressful time, getting help so that you're mentally in a good place is key to making good decisions. And a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners are, I don't know if it's terrified, but I end up speaking with a lot of business owners about, maybe you should get therapy. Like, here's some options for you.
That's a really great point. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Again, I like to keep these within 30 minutes. Everyone can get back to work on a Wednesday. Everyone who registered for this event will get an email with a recording for it, so you can rewatch it if you joined in late. And please share with your network if you think anyone would benefit from the subject matter that we talked about today. And thanks so much. Have a great day. We'll be back next month with another topic.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.